Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, episode 171.
I actually wish I'd started down that process earlier. I wish I'd been aware of the whole CWNP program much earlier in my career. It would have made a huge difference.
Wireless LAN Professionals is a place to educate, inform, encourage, and entertain those involved in wireless LANs. This Wireless LAN Professionals podcast is an audio manifestation of these goals. Our host is a wireless LAN veteran, consultant, designer, and teacher, Keith Parsons. And now, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals.
Well, Stephen, welcome to the show. How are you, sir?
Hi, Matthew. I'm well, thank you. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. I've got a beautiful Arizona weather where I'm at, and I don't know, you in Australia, how is the weather there?
Today it's pretty warm here in Brisbane, Australia. We're going to have a high of about 34 degrees Celsius. So I'm not an expert in converting that to Fahrenheit, but it's going to be high up there.
Wonderful. Well, introduce yourself. What's your involvement in the wireless LAN industry? What are you up to?
Sure. Well, I've been working with Wi-Fi for quite a while. I started off as a sort of a generalist jack of all trades network engineer, like most of us have. So working across routing, switching, voice over IP, data center, WAN, all of that traditional stuff, which led into Wi-Fi as well. So
what was that transition for you? What actually?
Right. Well, the transition was more around sort of, Wi-Fi was there. I was working for a big mining company, and it was just the requirement for Wi-Fi was sort of coming from actually outdoors to inside. So it was sort of the opposite. So there was a lot of outdoor, point-to-point, point-to-multi-point bridges. And there was a lot of use of Wi-Fi out at the remote mining sites, just as an easier method of connectivity. And then it actually started to bleed more into the office environments where Wi-Fi became a requirement for mobility. So that's where I was working with, wireless standards and deploying wireless controllers to various sites and standardizing across the board. So support for voice over Wi-Fi and things like that, as well as still maintaining connectivity out at the remote mining sites.
So you've been doing this for a few years then?
Yeah. Probably just over 13 years now since I started working with Wi-Fi, but it's not always been Wi-Fi. Like I said, it's been across all areas of networking, but I'd say I've specialized in Wi-Fi probably over the last 5 to 6 years.
And what are you doing exactly now?
Right now, I'm working with Cisco. I'm a technical solutions architect in the Australia and New Zealand region. So I'm working with partners and customers on their requirements and helping them, move forward with the latest and greatest in Cisco wireless technology. So it's quite fun.
Is that still in mining vertical, or have you branched from there?
Well, it's across everything. So I've actually had some other good experience as well. So not only did I work in the mining companies, I worked for some energy companies, but I've also worked on the service provider side. So I've done quite a few deployments and, end-to-end design through deployments and, tweaking and tuning, testing and optimizing wireless networks for multiple verticals working at a service provider. So now in my role at Cisco, it's across all verticals. So I'm not really tied to specific verticals or accounts or anything like that. I pretty much help out wherever I can across Australia and New Zealand. So I've already been working with, large government projects, large retail projects, some of the big universities. So it's quite varied.
Is there one that you tend to really enjoy more than the others?
Yeah, I think the education sector is really interesting because not only do they have a lot of challenging environments, which is where it's, some good discussions come up about wireless design and, how to optimize things and how to really get things working well there. But the universities are really, blazing ahead with innovation in terms of what they're trying to leverage the Wi-Fi for, whether it's location-based services, whether they're looking to integrate some BLE. They're really big on that analytics side of things. And also from a, wireless performance and assurance point of view, they're very keen to adopt those new technologies that are coming up around monitoring and testing your network. So I know we've seen various things from various vendors. You've got the likes of the sensors from 7 Signal. A lot of the wireless LAN vendors are doing some sort of assurance these days. So that's where I see a lot of exciting stuff happening and a lot of bleeding edge stuff happening in the education sector.
And who are you typically face to face with? Who are you interacting with personally?
Personally, yeah, I guess any given day looks completely different from the next. So it could be I could be working with systems engineers and account managers internal to Cisco, helping them understand the latest and greatest technologies. So the Catalyst 9800 controller was launched recently. So people were, even internal to Cisco, are still trying to get their head around how that fits into the bigger picture of things and how people migrate from current generation controllers or even the older generation controllers to these new ones. And the same goes for partners. So we have a large partner ecosystem that we're supporting, and we have large partners, we have small partners. So you get varying levels of skill in the wireless side of things, and sometimes it's just purely discussions around wireless best practices and fundamentals. Sometimes there will be some surprising questions that will come up, and I have the opportunity to help educate them, educate those partners. Or you get the scenario where a partner might be faced with remediating a bad install, but they don't really know how to tackle it. So that's where I can help them out and point them in the right direction and review their surveys and their analysis and their tests and things like that. So it's quite a varied role.
How much time, if any, are you spending like conducting a survey, doing some of that kind of research for different clients?
Yeah, so it is more hands-off compared to previous roles that I've had, while still requiring the technical knowledge and still being across what's happening and how to configure and deploy things. So for example, we might have an RFP come up or a tender come up, and I'll have to work on some surveys for that. Or maybe a colleague has produced some surveys for a predictive design, so I'll review that and provide feedback for that or any suggestions for improvements. On the flip side, we might have a partner that's doing the same thing, working on a tender, or as I mentioned, maybe they're doing some remediation activities and they need some extra eyes to look over it and draw comparisons between the RF side of things and how the Wi-Fi is operating. And typically they would do a wireless LAN controller configuration analysis. So that's where they sometimes need some help to join the dots between what they're seeing in a config and operation side of thing versus what they're seeing on the RF side of thing.
What was that transition like for you, going from into this more higher level role to when it was more boots on the ground?
Well, it was interesting. My previous role was with Ekahau as the Asia Pacific SE. So I was in that role for a while, which was purely hands off. So moving from service provider side into that role was a big change in terms of not hitting the tools every day. I'm not in there configuring things and not in there testing things every day. So it was sort of a switch from practical to theory almost. You're pretty much going back to needing to know the fundamentals from a technology perspective, and you're pretty much as everyone knows with Ekahau site survey and the tools there, you're working at the layer 1 and a little bit of layer 2 with those tools. So you really got to know your stuff at that layer, and it's really applicable to any vendor, any environment, any vertical, because it is a fairly vendor agnostic tool. It supports all the vendors. It's really about getting that initial RF and Wi-Fi design done properly and surveying it. So it was definitely an interesting role because it was more around, obviously it was a sales role, but also a training and enablement role. So again, spending time with partners and customers, training them up on Ekahau, pointing them in the direction of the likes of Keith and Blake and such to do ECSE training. So so I guess that was quite a good transition to a more hands-off role. I'd say now I'm a little bit more hands-on, and the role is a balance of the theory and the fundamental side, as well as knowing the practical side. Yeah,
you're not totally just touching, but you're educating, selling, but also having to really be knowledgeable of all the different pieces.
Exactly right. Yeah, it's a good challenge.
What does like education mean for you and to you? How do you stay where you need to be?
It's a constant process, and I mean, as we know, we hear it from a lot of CWNEs and veterans of the industry. They're just saying, the learning never stops, and learning can take many forms, whether it's on the job experience, learning from mistakes, or actually implementing something. We've got this fantastic community of wireless LAN professionals out there that, most people are pretty active with writing blogs, so a lot of information gets shared around in blogs. But also, obviously, there's the self-study or even, class, class attendance and attending an actual wireless LAN class, so such as a CWNP class or even a vendor wireless certification class is all helping you keep relevant and understand what's going on, and wrapping all of that up with the community side of things and the networking side of things with conferences such as Wi-Fi Trek and Wireless LAN Professionals Conference, and even the vendor conferences. That's all giving you insights into what's happening in the industry, what's happening with the technologies, how it could be useful, and you constantly got to keep on top of it and correlate that back to fundamentals that you've learned throughout your career.
Now, for someone who might say, that's great, but I'm just so busy with work, like what's that encouragement you might give to someone who just really knows that they need more education, more classes, more certifications, but they really feel overwhelmed?
It is definitely a challenge. Well, that's where finding a format that works for someone to consume some knowledge, and that's why this podcast is a great example of that, because I know a lot of people will be commuting to and from their day jobs, or even just driving at the weekends, and they just need half an hour to 60 minutes where they're absorbing some information and they don't have to have any attention on a screen or a book. So some people really get a lot of value out of these sorts of podcasts, which is fantastic. Other people, let's say, for example, they're commuting on a train. They have more opportunity to actually read something. So maybe they're reading an ebook, or maybe they've got some videos from a webinar, downloaded to their iPad, for example, that they can watch. So it's about maximizing what downtime you do have. I think a lot of people feel underwhelmed. You come across in any environment where you'll ask someone, "Oh, hey, how are you doing?" And most people say, "Yeah, I'm busy." It's busy as everything's crazy, and it's like that's just the default reaction. If people, actually stood back and actually took a bit more energy into managing their time, they'd probably be surprised at what they could do. But it's all about finding that format that works well for you in terms of consuming and understanding that information.
Yeah, and it's almost like a decision or an attitude of, I'm going to learn. Maybe this season in my life, I can't achieve this particular certification, but I'm going to have the mindset of a learner. Like you for those moments of margin where you could listen and be in that.
That's right.
Mind.
Well, even people that they're going down the CCIE wireless or the Aruba ACMX path, when you've got such a long period of study and preparation for those sorts of certifications. A lot of people say it's like, there's the technical element to it, there's the dedication to it and the commitment to it, but in the end, it actually turns out to be a very intensive time management exercise. So it's usually about formulating a plan, and like I said, figuring out what works best for you.
Did you do CWNE?
I did, yes. I got seated at CWNE earlier this year in April, which was awesome. So that was a pretty good, thanks. Yeah, it was a good achievement. And
we'll talk a little bit about that process for you. What did that look like?
I actually wish I'd started down that process earlier. I wish I'd been aware of the whole CWNP program much earlier in my career. Would have made a huge difference.
Why is that?
I don't think I would have necessarily attained CWNE any earlier, but I think it would have definitely enhanced my understanding of the fundamentals much earlier in my career, and it would have definitely helped around troubleshooting scenarios and definitely designing properly as well. So I actually sat a CWNE class with Devin Aiken in Sydney back in 2014. And that's sort of where I kicked off in that process under the CWNP program. But I never got around, coming back to that discussion about being too busy, I never got around to sitting the exam. So it wasn't until last year that I was like, right, I need to knuckle down and actually get these certifications out of the way.
What was that impetus that said to you, okay, it's time to do this?
I think that's as I was getting more awareness of the wireless LAN professionals community and seeing who's out there, what's happening, how are people actually making the most of their education and their career, and going, right, okay, well, I've started down this track. I can see the value and the benefits in doing it. I actually need to put my plan together and get it done. And also last year, I attended Wi-Fi Track for the first time too. So I was like, right, this is all going to give me a goal to make sure that I can get through these certifications by the end of the year. I'm going to attend Peter McKenzie's CWAP class and, get as much that I can out of that. And the reason why I say, I wish I would known about the program earlier would have been really beneficial to me. It doesn't necessarily mean I would have been better or, would have passed the exams sooner, because I think when I passed all of the professional level exams last year, my knowledge and experience was to the point where a lot of those exam questions and the content were a lot more relevant to the experience that I'd already had. So I think you could look at it from both perspectives. Either if you're new to wireless, those certifications and the training behind them is really going to help you improve your skill set and your understanding. But there's also a lot to be said from, actual practical experience, working on the tools, working in environments, fixing things and breaking things, and drawing from that experience too. So that sort of goes back to that continuous learning exercise. There's always going to be different stages in your career that you'll learn new things, or that sort of training will be relevant in different ways.
So you last year said, okay, you got the certifications, and what was the rest of that process look like for you?
Yeah, so I passed CWNA last year, the exam, I think it was August last year, and then I attended Wi-Fi Track in October over in Orlando. So that was a pretty cool experience. So obviously that was a big leap that I took to travel all the way over from Australia for that. Not only for the education side of things, but from the professional networking side of things was a fantastic opportunity. As I mentioned, I sat Peter McKenzie's CWAP class. I know a lot of people say that CWAP is the one that you should sit right after CWNA, so it sort of sets you up for the other exams, and I definitely agree with that. Basically, it gets you into the nitty-gritty details of how 802.11 operates, and that really ties into your design and troubleshooting and analysis practices. So I actually sat the CWDP, the design professional exam at Wi-Fi Track. I passed that. And then while I was at Wi-Fi Track, I actually scheduled, the CWSP and CWAP exams for the next couple of weeks once I got back from Wi-Fi Track, and just got them all passed, and then started on the process of producing and structuring my CWNA application, and worked on that for the next couple of months after that.
And just knocked it out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I had my plan. I knew exactly what things I had to do in which order, and I knew when I wanted to achieve them by, and had backup plans in case I, didn't pass an exam or didn't get as high a mark as I wanted to, and had to resit it. And at the same time, I was drawing together ideas for my CWNE application essays and things like that, and all the while also working on blog posts and things like that to try and build up my, published content, and also helping with marketing myself and getting my personal brand out there. So that's where everything sort of hinged around attending Wi-Fi Track and taking that next big step in networking.
What did you do your essays on? Or how many essays did you have to write?
Yeah, it's 3 essays, and I was lucky to be able to draw on some experiences that sort of focused each essay more weighted towards, to design. For example, the second one was around security, and the third one was around analysis and troubleshooting. So I know the CWNE board are looking for people to explain how they understand how Wi-Fi works and operates, and draw upon not only their experiences, but correlate that back to what they've learned through the CWNP program. So from a design perspective, it was about a challenging and large-scale design, and going in there and remediating some issues, and also improving the design. So I was basically talking about what steps I took to improve things and optimize things, and testing and deployment. So it was basically about the provisioning and deployment and design stage of the life cycle. And then the security focused essay was around analyzing results from a penetration test and a security audit on, a guest Wi-Fi network. So it was basically tying those results back to best practices for Wi-Fi security, and also recommending, remediation steps and how those were implemented, how they were tested, while still meeting the customer requirements for the operations of that network. So it's definitely drawing back to the best practices and fundamentals that you learn in the CWSP class. And then the last one was around, remediating performance issues on a wireless LAN. So doing RF surveys, doing packet captures, doing packet analysis, doing before and after testing and comparisons of environments and tweaking things here and there. So just outlining that methodology that was taken to improve the performance in that environment. So it's hard to cover a lot of detail, but you need to be detailed in the essays, but you've also got to stick to a word count. So I find one of the big challenges that people have that I've talked to about those essays is keeping under that word count, knowing how to present your ideas clearly and concisely, and not just talking on for pages and pages and pages. So so that's definitely a big challenge.
What was the contrast between this and some of the different Cisco certifications that you've worked through?
I think it's the same as anyone says. The vendor certifications are sort of 50% about fundamentals and theory, and 50% about how you configure their particular features and products. So, I mean, that's great. Depending, if you're doing the certification to get better at that particular vendor's product, then that's fantastic. But you can't always depend on those vendor certifications to give you enough of the fundamental knowledge. And sometimes even the best practices that are recommended in those certification courses or even the exams, when the questions come up, sometimes are specifically relevant to that vendor's products or features. So that's where the CWNP program, taking a vendor agnostic approach, gets really deep into the 802.11 standards and amendments and how the protocol actually operates, and helps you understand what is normal, so that you're actually better prepared to go into any sort of vendor environment and actually just work from layer one upwards, troubleshooting things or understanding how things work. And, it helps you also understand. So cool, you learn about beamforming. What does that mean for Cisco versus Aruba versus Ruckus? How do each of these vendors implement those technologies differently? And you get a better understanding of that when you actually understand those features from an 802.11 standard point of view, compared to what the technical marketing speakers from those vendors,
and maybe be able to identify marketing speak a little bit quicker and easier.
Oh, totally, yeah.
So what has, if anything, has changed, or what maybe surprised you most on this side of having the certification now?
I think it comes back to the comment earlier about is continuous learning. So it doesn't stop once you get CWNE, and it was actually surprising that it was actually true. After getting CWNE earlier in the year, and networking with other people in the industry, getting more exposure to other people that are doing similar things around the world, or getting involved with other people that are at conferences, it's almost like your world is opened up to an even higher level of awareness of what is out there to be learned, and also giving you a bit of humility and realizing how much you don't know. So, it's fantastic that you've got this expert level certification. It's great that you've proven that you understand the fundamentals and how things work. But then it's like, okay, here's this humble self-analysis of myself going, what do I know and what do I really don't know? And it's really surprising that how much you don't know and how much there is still to be learned, because while it's such a broad industry and such a broad technology, and I think that's why the likes of CWNP are looking to introduce additional certifications. They mentioned at Wi-Fi Trek this year about the integration professional side of things, because it's not just Wi-Fi you need to know. Lucky for me to come from the broad background of doing other sorts of networking technologies, but not everyone has that opportunity. So, I'm sure there's people that have got CWNEs and they're like, great, I know wireless really well, but wait, I don't know routing, or I don't know data center technologies, or I don't know VoIP as well as I could. So there's always other things to learn that supplement your Wi-Fi skills and experience.
On the Wi-Fi, I guess, networking side of things with these clients that you'll work with where you're, doing remediation or fixing what's wrong from previous installs, what are some of the things that you're seeing that maybe you would give advice on, or things that you see that kind of commonly come up that are mistakes that need to be fixed?
Yeah. The biggest mistake that I see, and it's applicable to several different verticals, whether it's manufacturing or industry or anything with a warehouse or challenging RF environments where you've got large aisles and things like that, you still see too many deployments with bad RF design. It's using omnidirectional antennas or mounting antennas and access points all the way up on a 15-meter high ceiling. It's just gives you no end of issues, especially when these environments, they're trying to use, voice over Wi-Fi headsets. They're trying to use, picking applications or, mobile computers on forklifts that are, roaming pretty quickly throughout the environment. It just doesn't work well. So that's one of the common things that I see popping up.
What's the solution? Is that just more training, getting the word like CWNP stuff out there, or?
It's definitely more training and awareness and education. So, I think it comes from all areas of the industry. Not only do the vendors have to do it, the vendors have to make sure that their partners and the people that are actually going out there and installing and configuring their equipment and programming their features are actually more educated, and also in turn, the vendors and the partners educating their customers more as well. So, it's always a challenge when you've got a customer who says, oh, well, the Wi-Fi sort of works, but it's a bit better. Can't you just put in the newer version of the access point? And the partner's saying, no, we need to do directional antennas. We need to do this. And suddenly the budget goes way out the window. It suddenly increases, and that's where it becomes a political discussion. So that's where it helps to have the vendors and the partners and the customers all on the same page from an understanding point of view as what's best. And like any SE role or sales role, that's where you got to find the balance between requirements and budget and what's feasible, what's not feasible.
Setting expectations properly.
Totally. The expectations is probably where things go wrong in the initial part of the process, right? They don't set the expectations properly, and whether that's from a ignorance point of view or maybe just a lack of capabilities point of view, maybe the partner who or people who installed that network in the first place just didn't understand RF well enough or good design practices well enough to know that what they were doing was wrong.
So talk to your younger self. Any advice now with different experience where you are now, if you could go back 10 years and give yourself some encouragement, what would that be?
Yeah, like I said, I wish I'd started on the CWNP program earlier on. I think it was a bit challenging early in my career because I was working for a pretty much mostly Cisco shop. So I wish I'd had more exposure to other vendors' technologies and equipment earlier on as well, just to broaden that sort of experience and see what else was possible. I got that experience later on in my career, which was good. But I think, keeping your options open early in your career is good. And, making sure that you're learning from all sorts of different areas of it, whether it's wireless, whether it's any other networking technology, routing, switching, data center, collaboration. The reason why it's good to sort of learn that broad aspect, not only from a technology perspective, but across vendors as well, is because later on in your career, when you are faced with this scenario, maybe there's a customer that you're working with that has Cisco wireless, but Juniper switches, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Or, maybe you're ripping out an Aruba wireless deployment and putting in Cisco, but then you've got HP switches underneath it. And when they come to you and ask you to work out PoE budgets and things like that, or understand how the layer 2 switching protocols work on those vendors' equipment, then you've got to spend a lot more time researching and finding out information about that to make yourself, fully capable of tackling that sort of project. So that's, getting broad experience across multiple vendors, multiple technologies is definitely very beneficial.
If you were going to hire someone to do your same role, what are some of the things that you would be looking for to be successful in the role that you have now?
Sure. Well, I mean, you mentioned expectations before. That's a big one. So you not only do you have to be able to talk the talk and walk the walk from a technical point of view, it's all about gathering requirements, understanding requirements, and setting the right expectations. So that's where the solutions part of the job title comes into it. You need to be able to translate requirements from a customer into solutions. And a lot of the times, customers don't even know what they want.
Yeah.
They'll say they want one thing, and they'll get into a tender process, or they'll put a RFP out there, and they don't actually figure out what they want until the end of the RFP process, and then you have to go through it all again, because they've suddenly got a better understanding of what's possible or what could be achieved. So you've got to be really good at presenting ideas, presenting solutions, and understanding the bigger picture. And that's what I was saying before about multiple technologies, not just Wi-Fi, because it usually goes much beyond what you're doing with Wi-Fi. Mm-hmm. It usually is going to be a conversation further down the line around, okay, switches. Are my switches going to support, like I said before, PoE budget for those access points? Or how is this, new wireless assurance system going to give you visibility into applications? Some vendors, they can do that from the wireless side. Some vendors need to do that further down the line from, telemetry from routers and switches and so forth. So that's where you need to sort of be creative, and you need to be good at analyzing requirements, setting expectations, presenting ideas. So, presenting the ideas part comes into public speaking skills, writing skills, and the education side of things as well. You need to be able to prove that you can educate people from all different levels throughout a customer or a partner, whether they're engineers, management, whether they're executive level. You need to be comfortable talking at that sort of level. So, so for this sort of role, the technical experience is almost a given. It's all of the other professional skills that people either don't have a lot of experience of, or they don't have a lot of awareness of the requirement around the soft skills, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And I think that's another opportunity for a lot of professionals to spend time on upskilling. And I think my experience on working on the service provider side definitely helped with that, because you are presenting to a lot of different customers and a lot of different verticals, and lots of different levels there. So working only just on the customer side, you're working with the same people every day. You're presenting to the ideas up the management chain to the same people every day. It's completely different to working on the service provider side and having to work in different scenarios. Sometimes they're very political scenarios as well, which is where the requirements and expectations is a strong point.
Yeah. So future of Wi-Fi, anything exciting coming down in the standards, anything that you're looking forward to?
I'm really keen to see where location-based services and positioning goes with the likes of 802.11ax. I've been keeping an eye on it, and I know a lot of people have been intrigued about, when Android Pie was announced to say it was going to support Wi-Fi round-trip time, or, doing a different measurement of proximity based on this new little protocol. And it's sort of gone quiet since Android Pie came out, and I'm sort of trying to keep my ear to the ground internally as best as I can with Cisco to find out what's happening. I haven't heard anything yet, but I was doing some digging and diving into some IEEE timeline stuff back at Wi-Fi Trek this year, and saw that there's an amendment called 802.11az called Next Generation Positioning, which is being worked on from now, and the timeline says it's going to be worked on through to 2020, and it's going to be taking things like fine timing measurement that's mentioned in this Wi-Fi RTT that Android Pie can use. So I'm kind of keen to see what that's going to mean with 802.11ax when you've got multiple resource units on a channel, and each of those resource units having different signal to noise ratio, what that's going to mean for location measurements and accuracy. Definitely keen to see what happens in that space. I think there could be a lot of improvements in terms of accuracy and use cases for location-based services.
Well, very cool. Stephen, so if anyone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to just, or if something you said intrigued them and they want to talk more about it, someone knows the answers?
Yeah. Well, Twitter's the best place. You can reach me at Stephen, STEPHEN _Cooper, COOPER, or I've got my blog, wificoops.com as well.
Great. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for being here with us today. I appreciate it.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Matthew. I really appreciate you having me here.
Absolutely. Cheers.
Cheers.
10 Talks.
My name is Robert Boardman. I am a full-time network engineer at a college. It's a smaller college, so I basically run the entire network, end-to-end, so that's security to wireless. Recently, for about the last year and a half, I've been consulting on the side, and as some of you know, I kind of do a 3D printing thing. You can find me on Twitter. I have a blog, and I also co-host a YouTube channel about Wi-Fi. So come watch. We need viewers. So why we started with the basics. How many network owners do I have in here? How many people are consultants? They just own their own network or are part of a team that owns it. So as you guys know, we have two types of problems. The ones you inherited and the ones you created. That's the only types of problems we have. And so I got into consulting thinking that I was gonna get to be Lee Badman and find bugs. Because that man finds bugs anywhere, or rare things. I wanted to find stuff that, you know. So, bonus, can anybody tell me what this frame is? This packet capture, what's special about it? And it's actually legit, not created by Jake. So, what medium is it using? No, I mean, what? It's a PCF frame. So yeah, this was courtesy of Peter McKenzie. He actually caught it in the wild, and so that's an actual frame. So this is what I was expecting to find. I was going to go out there and I was going to be able to have tons of blog material because I would find rare problems that don't exist, or something new. Turns out this is my number one problem. So usually you see the car parked in the middle of a lane and using that as code channel. I found this, and this is 80 megahertz wide channels. This was really hard to find because in California everybody drives a smart car, so it took me a long time to find a parking picture like this. So when we talk about channel widths, do we have anybody from vendors? Any vendors? Any vendors? Can we ask why 80 megahertz is default? Okay. So, but speaking about channel widths, is there anything wrong with this right now? We're using 80 wide. Do you see anything really wrong outside of the fact that it's 80 wide? This is an actual office. So Keith always says it best, use as wide as channels as you can until you can't. So what it actually was is, here's the surrounding area. So this is a high rise in San Francisco. So you're sitting here talking about 80 wide is fine, and this was, so if you work for Meraki, yeah, thank you for that, by the way. Default, 80 wide. Out of the box, this was a small startup. They had one guy who was a server guy, who was now a networking guy, and they bought Meraki because it's easy. And they just threw it up, and they were wondering why their Zoom calls weren't working. So, so using channel widths, we need to make sure that we're using appropriate channel widths for the environment you're in. Let's see, next, power. So trying to find a really funny slide about power is really hard. So I just put up Keith's chart. So if you get these slides, you at least have one slide that has some real value to it. When I was coming up in Wi-Fi, I took an air magnet class a long time ago. And one thing the instructor said to me that always stuck to me is you never use a milliwatt more than you need. And so I like to use this example, and they always gave us the football field to show you power, but they never gave you the arena. So this is actually USC's arena, their floor plan, and it's actually scaled to the 100 yards of the football field. And that is a Meraki MR42. Can somebody tell me what power setting you think that's at? How many dBm? Because that's what Meraki uses in there. Hey, 29 is actually the highest it goes, but yeah, that's 29. So that's an arena in 5 gigahertz too. We're not doing 2.4. What's this one? Same AP, different power setting, 1 dBm. So as you can see, and that's neg 67, that ring is 85, neg 85. So as you can see, that's an arena, a flat arena, of course. But so power is very, very important. And when we walked into that office that I showed you, the Wi-Fi Explorer, 5 APs, all on 29 dBm. So you can imagine roaming was fun for them too. So next, we'll go talking about design and AP placement. These are all real, there's no staging. So if you look at that first one, this is the wall clock. If I have to talk about this, we're probably in the wrong conference. That second picture is literally a hockey puck that is on a floor, and not even attached to the floor, right next to a doorway, and people were kicking it around. The other end of the office, the guy wanted his own personal one, so he set it right next to his desk. And then that third one is actually frozen antennas. So I don't know if we think about water and attenuation, but how do you think that antenna is doing with all that ice? Yeah, yeah, that's ice. And then we'll go into my next big problem is configuration and RRM or ARM or whatever your flavor of the week is. So this, in fact, we were recently in a hotel in San Jose and at MFD. And yeah, every single AP was on a single channel, running wild. Now, we can talk about RRM, and I'm sure, okay, who likes RRM? I do, I love it. I use it in my environment in the college all the time, but I also tune it and don't let it run wild and just say, okay, RRM, go to town. So there's nothing wrong with any of these radio resource management tools. It's just how you use them for your environment and designing to them. And then configuration. So 2 worst things ever invented in my mind, client load balancing and band steering. So I have had more in that office, more issues with client load balancing and Meraki. So thank you, whoever the engineer was that did that, than any other problem, period. It's just so we need to understand what these features are and not turn them on without just being like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. Because I don't know if anybody has ever seen client load balancing and you have 80 wide channels and 29 dBm of power running around in a 10,000 square foot office, you don't roam, and the AP is like, oh, you gotta go. You gotta go. So, yeah. Oh, wow, that was a lot quicker than I thought it was gonna be. So that's really kind of all I had. I just wanted to come up and talk about the fact that we sometimes forget the basics and we start looking for problems when really our problems are design or overuse of power, channel widths. Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Wireless LAN Professionals Podcast, the podcast for wireless LAN professionals by wireless LAN professionals. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Wireless LAN Pros for all the latest news and updates, and also connect directly with Keith on Twitter at Keith R. Parsons. Head over to www.wlanpros.com for this episode's show notes, as well as the latest in all things Wi-Fi.